All right, and I'll go to week 4 here, and I'll change the check-in here to where you guys can check in. All right. Those just joining, make sure and check into week 4 module and click on the check-in and submit your name. All right, those just joining, make sure and go to week 4 module to check in. All right, those just joining, make sure to go to week 4 and click on the check-in module and submit your name. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. All right, this is week 4, and we're going over chapter 4 content. Make sure to submit your name in week 4 module if you haven't done so already. All right, this week review questions for chapter 4 quiz and week 4 lab this week. We're doing talking a lot about password hacking and penetration testing tools this Thursday, and be doing a lot of discussion on that and some tools that are out there that hackers use, and also on the network side of things, how to harden your network to stop hackers from coming in. Next week, we're looking at network defenses. Week 6, browser security. Week 7, steganography. Art of hidden writing, will be hiding data and other data. Risk identification. Week 8, research topic night. That week on week 9, we will meet on Tuesday. We'll not meet on Thursday. Week 10, TrueCrypt lab. Week 11, email encryption. Week 12, virtual PC. Week 13, drive forensics. And then 14 and 15, final presentation. So those just joining, make sure and click on week 4, submit your name in the check-in module. I'm going to cover chapter 4 content, and then we'll be done for the night. Hopefully you don't have to travel tonight anymore and you stay home. Don't believe it's started getting bad outside yet, so hopefully you can stay home and not have to travel when it does. All right. So look at vulnerability assessment and mitigating attacks this week. And look at what vulnerability assessment's all about, why it's important, some assessment techniques and tools, differences between vulnerability scanning and penetration testing, and techniques to mitigate attacks. So vulnerability assessment basically is a systematic evaluation of how to asset exposure. So attackers, forces of nature, and any potential harm. So those things that can come in and hurt your network and attack your network are these 3: attackers, force of nature, and harmful entry. Aspects of vulnerability assessment: asset identification, threat evaluation, vulnerability appraisal, risk assessment, and risk mitigation. So the first step in vulnerability assessment is asset identification, where you inventory things you have on your network. A good program for that is spiceworks.com. It's a free program you can download and install on any computer on a network and even at home to inventory your network. And then you can put a dollar value on it, upload PDF documents that have to do with the warranty of those devices. Other common assets you might not think of in the IT world is people. And so people that work for you, people that are in your department, people in your company, customers also, physical assets, data, hardware, and software, some other common assets. So first once you inventory things, you have to figure out what the value is of each and every asset. And the value is usually assessed by its critical nature or critical mass in the organizational goals. How well could you function without that asset or not function without that asset is going to determine the critical mass of a asset. So how much revenue this asset generates, how difficult is it to replace that asset, and the impact if that asset is unavailable to the organization. And then you could also rank them on a number scale like 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, 1 being least critical, to 10 being most critical, or 5 being most critical. Then you go through what's called threat evaluation, where you list potential threats like breaking in a door, weather, viruses, malware. Threat modeling is where you basically understand from an attacker's point of view how they attack and why they attack. And usually do scenarios for this. And they have what's called an attack tree that we'll see in a second, which is basically an inverted tree structure, which it visually represents a potential attack. So here's some categories of common threat agents you've heard of and maybe experienced yourself in your home or business. Natural disaster, compromise intellectual property, like software pirated, espionage, spies come and steal data or schedule, extortion, blackmail, hardware failure or errors, firewall blocks all network, human error, human blocks or employee drops laptop, sabotage of vandalism, attacker implants worm, erases a file, software attack, virus, worm, or denial of service, software failures, a bug prevents program from properly loading, technical obsolescence, program does not function under the new operating system, theft, something stolen from an unlocked room, like a desktop, or utility interruption, power's cut off. Here's the inverse tree. In the inverse tree setup for the attack tree, the target is generally at the top, and then it goes through different levels. So, first level, second level, third level, and fourth level in this example. So, start at the bottom. How are you going to get to this car stereo? How could a thief get to a car stereo? Well, first step, or level 4, threaten an attendant at a parking lot, let's say, blackmail an attendant, or bribe an attendant. Level 3, then make a copy of the key or grab a purse. And notice on this level 3, skip level 4 altogether. Just grab somebody's purse and take the keys. Level 2, carjack, steal key, and break glass. You'll notice under the steal key, it does involve a key, meaning it does involve level 3 at least. But level 2, the carjacking and breaking glass, is all by itself, skipping level 1, 4, and 3 altogether. And then finally, the stereo itself that's stolen. So there's many different ways, as this example shows, how one asset can be assessed. A threat agent like this, a threat model like this, can determine how something can be attacked or how some asset can be compromised. Another one is student grades. Level 3 on this one. Level 3, look under mouse pad, watch shoulder, can then steal password and access grade. Or watch over shoulder, steal password, access grade. Or level 3, exploit software security hole, defeat the security, and then access the grading system. And then level 2, by itself, skipping level 3, use an open unattended computer to access student grade system. So an appraisal of vulnerability on a system a lot of times will need to be done from an outside source because they're going to be unbiased. to find out whatever the current weaknesses of the organization might be. Every asset should be viewed in light of its threat, category or catalog each vulnerability, and then assess it. Determine damage resulting from attack, and assess likelihood that that vulnerability is a risk to the organization. So under impact, there's 5 criteria that goes over. One is no impact, small impact, significant, major, and catastrophic. For no impact, virtually no impact on organization, somebody steals a mouse. Small impact, produce small periods of inconvenience. Example, specific brand or type and type of hard disk drive that fails requires spare drives may be available, and devices may periodically be tested. Significant, a vulnerability that results in loss of employee productivity due to downtime. Because of capital outlay to alleviate could be considered significant. Example, malware injected in the network could be classified as significant. Major vulnerabilities are those that have considerable negative impact. The theft of the latest product research and development data through the back door of a network could be considered major. Catastrophic. Those considered catastrophic are generally events that would cause the organization to halt completely in functioning or seriously cripple. Example, tornado, fire, flood, things of that nature. So one of the things when it comes to assessment is what's called single loss expectancy. This is expected monetary loss each time a risk occurs. Calculating that by multiplying the asset by the exposure. Exposure factor is percentage of assets likely to be destroyed by a particular risk. All retail stores have this SLE when it comes to theft. People walking out the door with product, you're going to have some type of single loss expectancy every year from risk of items being stolen. Analyze loss is expected over one period of year, multiply it by analyze rate and rate of occurrence. And then estimate the probability that that will occur, and then you can mitigate it by what can you do about the risk? How can it be can those risks be tolerated? If so, how much can they be tolerated? And options for dealing with these risks. You can diminish them, as in security with theft, maybe more RFID tags on products that would stop people from walking out the door with products. To transferring, say you outsource your insurance, so you buy a company to come and secure with cameras and people your location, or just buy more insurance. In the case of theft, you just insure to lose so much a year. Or you might just say, you know what, we're going to accept the risk and accept the loss each year. It's just part of our company. It's not worth getting insurance, not worth outsourcing it. We really can't diminish it much. So we just have to accept it. So on the risk identifications, you've got, again, asset identification, where you inventory things and get its value. Threat identification, you categorize those threats and design an attack tree. Vulnerability assessment is where you determine current weakness and use assessment tools. Assessment tools we'll look at in a second. One of them means SpiceWorks, also is a good assessment tool. And then risk assessment is where you estimate the impact, calculate the loss expectancy, estimate probability that it will happen, and decide whether you're going to diminish the risk, transfer it, or accept it. So there's some tools out there. Microsoft Baseline Security Tools is one where it can look at your computers to determine how well in line they are with updates on software and security. But a baseline basically means just a standard for security. So a baseline standard might say 90% of all company computers must have antivirus updated. Could also have a comparison, compare present state to baseline. Note, evaluate, and possible address differences in baseline. So application development techniques would be minimize vulnerabilities during software development. Challenge to this would be like software application size, lack of security, future attack techniques. You'd review how things are required when in the design phase, how things are reviewed, how code is reviewed, and correcting bugs and fixing bugs, and some type of security update distribution schedule. Some tools, IP addresses uniquely identified each network device. You got TCP/IP that can help determine a network's functionality on a network. Port number, determining what ports are open and not open. Like port 80 is an internet port, so it's going to be open. So let's say you're an organization wants to block port 21, so you do an assessment to make sure all computers have port 21 blocked. So assessment tool for port numbers might reserve well-known port numbers, like I just mentioned, port 80, port 21, port for FTP, port 25 for email. And you could also have register port numbers for unique applications, not as widely used, or dynamic port numbers for any application to use. So here's some port numbers that are commonly used on a network. Port 21 already mentioned, or 20, which is FTP, 22 secure FTP, 23 telnet, 69 and 80 FTP and HTTP. NetBIOS is 139, HTTPS 443, and FTP secure is 989 or 990. So you need to know what ports will be open, let's say, for network, and block those that aren't used or needed to be used. Because if they're open, hackers can use them. You can use port scanning software to determine that. Microsoft Baseline is one. Searches for port vulnerabilities, open, closed, or blocked. Here's an example of one called Advanced Port Scanner. You'll notice it's searching a group of IP ranges and then telling you exactly what ports are open. It expanded an example here, one of the IP addresses, and it notices 5 ports are open. And it visibly shows here 21's open, 25's open, and 110 is open. So you determine what's open. You look at what's needed to be open, what's needed to be closed, and then you adjust accordingly. Protocol analyzers is where hardware software captures packets known as sniffers, commonly used for protocol analyzers, used by network admins for troubleshooting, characterizing network traffic, and security analysis. Wireshark is a port analyzer play around with and used. And one of the things in IT security that's used quite a bit to determine network activity. Here's an example of one called EtherDetect, which also is an important one, much like the ones out today that are common. And so notice it's scanning the IPs, it's scanning by time, by port, and then below breaking up that packet into information. In this case, to get information for HTTP packet. So Wireshark's one you're familiar with. It's a lot like EtherDetect. It can analyze your traffic. The next is basically vulnerability scanners. It looks for vulnerabilities like Microsoft Security-Based Analyzer. And here's an example of this one. It scans the network of all the computers and then tells what the vulnerabilities are on that network. You can click on the vulnerability, and on the right, it'll tell you exactly what the course of action should be, whether it be an update, a patch, and then apply them. Example of vulnerability scanners could alert when new systems have been added, detect when an internal system begins to port scan other systems, maintain a log of all interactive network sessions, track all client server vulnerabilities, track when systems communicate with other internal systems. Problems with assessment tools is there's no standard for collecting vulnerabilities. And there is one called the Open Vulnerability and Assessment Language, OVAL, which is designed to be open source that a lot of places are using now. One of them be KBox, which is for all types of systems. A lot of them can be web-based as well. And this example here shows vulnerabilities that were found, 78 of them. And then lastly, some ways you can secure your network is 3 ways. Honeypot, which is basically a computer that has minimal security on purpose, intentionally designed to, you might have heard of the term, it's easier to bring, it's easier to get something done by honey, than it is by, trying to force your way into something. So a honeypot basically is a way to get hackers to come into a network, and you want them to come to this computer intentionally to contain bogus data files. And the goal is basically to reveal their attackers' techniques, compare it to actual production system to determine security level against the attack. A honeypot will basically, a honey net is where a network is set up with one or more honeypots in that network. So vulnerability scanning versus penetration testing. Vulnerability scanning we've talked about already, which is basically scanning the network for vulnerabilities, creating a report, usually performed on an inside security parameter and does not interfere with normal operations. Penetration testing is the flip side, where you're literally trying to break into the system to exploit weaknesses, relying on testers' skill, knowledge, and cunning, usually conducted by an independent contractor outside the company to see what they can get into. And then a report is created. A couple ways to penetrate tests is black box testing, where tester has no prior knowledge of a network. White box testing, tester has deep knowledge of a network and the systems in it. And gray box testing, there's some limited information been provided to the tester. Vulnerability scanning can happen and penetration testing can happen in multiple frequencies, from once a year to once a quarter. And the goal is, again, to bring in vulnerabilities and discover them and fix it. You could have in-house technicians, independent contractors, in-house technicians for vulnerability, penetration testing for contracting outside, all the way down to the cost, which in vulnerability scanning is low because you're using your own people. High on penetration testing because you have to outsource. Both of them have a report, and then value, detecting weakness or hardware, software weaknesses. And on penetration testing, preventing exposure to businesses, reducing exposure to businesses' failure on software and hardware. So when you're mitigating and deterring attacks, some of the standard techniques is creating a security posture, configuring controls, and creating and hardening systems, and many, many reporting iterations over a period of time. So that is chapter 4. And so make sure this week you finish your content for chapter 4 as far as your reading, review questions and quiz. And on Thursday, we will look at um, hacking, hackers, how hacking passwords and how that's done using tools like Cain and Abel. And so when you come in Thursday, we'll be doing that. Make sure and bring your 3-ring binder for the handout. And any software that we might be getting will also be brought that night as well. So be careful outside, and I will see everybody Thursday.